And joining us now with more on tax reform and other issues on the Hill, Senator Chris Coons, member of the Foreign Relations, Judiciary, and Appropriations Committees. And Senator, we definitely want to talk about patents and strengthening that, because you can look at the history of the world, and it wasn't until you could own something, intellectual property, GDP, personal per capita GDP, that's when it went up, because inventors used to be paid by the kings and queens, and it was like a novelty, but they couldn't own them. So this is a bipartisan thing that you're doing with a couple other senators, and we all understand that. It was like, it brought a tear to my eye reading your efforts on that. But before we get to that, let's talk about this other stuff. You saw what Congressman Ryan said about tax reform, and then there's the Obamacare repeal, and McConnell is he walking around with a briefcase where it's like, chained to his all the stuff's in there, nobody's seen it, and it takes 3 keys to open. Do you know anything of what's in this bill at this point? Does anybody?
I have no idea what's in the Republican leadership written Obamacare repeal and replace bill in the Senate, and neither do many Republicans and all Democrats. And this is no way to produce a bill of this significance. Folks may well forget this, but the process that led to the Affordable Care Act included dozens of hearings and many days of public markups of that bill in front of the Finance Committee and the Health and Education Committee before it ever reached the floor. And I understand there's folks who say, well, that was then, this is now. The reality is that there will be very little time after the big reveal of what's in this bill before we're going to be asked to vote on it.
That's what they want.
I frankly wish that my constituents could know what's in it, and I do think that's what they want. President Trump recently denounced the House bill as being mean, and my hunch is part of why all the contents of this bill are being concealed from the general public and even from some Republican senators is over concerns that once folk understand how it will impact people, there will be a lot of pressure against it.
Senator, is there a chance that if you saw the bill, you might vote for it?
There is a chance that if I saw the bill, there would be things in it that I would support. If it is anything like the House bill, it is unlikely that I would support the entire bill. I have met with a number of my Republican colleagues, both recently in recent weeks and in the last Congress, to say, I recognize the failings of the Affordable Care Act. A lot of small business owners in my state have complained that their rates have gone up too much and they haven't been able to afford the health care that's now available. And I've offered to work with them. I've introduced bills to try and reform some aspects of the Affordable Care Act. But I wouldn't support and can't support the House bill, the American Health Care Act. And if the Senate bill looks anything like that, I suspect they will have to rely solely on Republican votes to try and pass it.
Okay, let's go and talk about this other issue we alluded to, and the patent issue. Where are the shortfalls in patent law right now that need to be fixed by this new initiative?
Well, first, I'm glad you recognized that patents are an American creation. They were in our Constitution, and they're a critical protected property right that allows inventors to take advantage of the value of their inventions. In recent years, there have been both Supreme Court decisions and actions in the Patent and Trademark Appeals Board that have weakened the value of those patents. There's detailed technical things about how you can now challenge a patent repeatedly after it's been granted. That weakens your ability to go to the capital markets to raise venture capital because it's less reliable. And the bill that Republican Senator Tom Cotton and I are introducing together today in the Senate would address some of those concerns and bring us back to being the #1 patent system in America. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce last year said we have dropped to the 10th best patent system in the world. We'd previously always been first, and I think this is an important bipartisan effort.
A lot of lawyers probably don't like listening to what you're saying, right? I mean, that's who's on the other side of this, isn't it? I mean, the fees involved with patent disputes and patent challenges and patent litigation. I mean, you'll put half the lawyers out of business if you make it more difficult to keep doing this, won't you? I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but wouldn't that happen?
Well, my goal is to strengthen patents so that inventors, innovators, university researchers, venture capitalists, technology transfer offices, all of those will benefit from having stronger patents. It may or may not mean that there's less litigation. What it means is that in that litigation, it's more likely that the small guy who has invented something really big, really disruptive in their garage is going to be able to take it to market and to continue the innovation that's been so important to our success and our competitiveness as a global economy.
And in the sort of aspirational Shark Tank sort of world, Senator, I'm sure that is music to a lot of entrepreneurs' ears. But does this also help the big guy? I mean, there are a lot of patent holders here in the U.S. whose patents are challenged by products that are made overseas. Does it make it any easier for them to take those battles to court?
Well, what this does is it strengthens the patents that are issued. It's actually neutral to whether you're a big company or a small company, a startup or well-established. It strengthens patents so that if I'm a Dow or a DuPont, I have a stronger patent when I am protecting it against infringement, whether that's by a startup or a foreign company. But as we all know, if you're going to work and if you're going to succeed in a Shark Tank world, you've got to be able to get access to capital. And having a strong and defensible patent makes it 50% more likely that you will attract startup capital. And if you've got a really great, innovative breakthrough invention, it's going to get attacked. It's going to get infringed. And being able to defend it in court is the time-honored way that in our country over the last 200 years, we've incentivized people to take the risk of entrepreneurship with the possibility of a real reward. So I think stronger patents are good for everybody up and down the chain, whether large or small, who has a disruptive invention they want to take to market.
Right, and you're working to put this together. You worked with a couple of Republicans, or at least one. Who's in on this with you, Senator?
Senator Tom Cotton of Arkansas is my initial co-sponsor. There are several other conservative Republicans looking hard at this. This has been endorsed in the last Congress by Heritage Action and by Eagle Forum and by the American Conservative Union, as well as some strong business groups. And it's our hope that we will have both conservative and liberal senators on this bill, folks who recognize that the promise of entrepreneurship relies on strong and defensible patents.
Just a couple of times there, you were talking about the private sector and an idea and entrepreneurship and getting away from some of the constraints. You almost sounded like a Republican, Senator. I mean, it was really strange for me. It was surreal, actually. Do you know that there are times where you start making a lot of sense? I mean, is that somewhat new? You're laughing, but
that is not at all new to me. That would be music to my grandparents' ears, were I to continue in my family's long tradition of being Republicans. I was the first Democrat in the known history of my family.
Sheep.
And frankly, I grew up in a family of inventors and entrepreneurs, and I think I have a strong, a healthy respect for what it means to take the risks of entrepreneurship and just how demanding and hard it is to navigate, trying to get capital, trying to take products to market, and trying to scale up. Frankly, it wouldn't be such a bad thing if we had more Republicans sounding like Democrats and Democrats sounding like Republicans. That way we might solve some of the real problems.
Can I call your parents and your grandparents? And I'm raising some kids. Where did they go wrong? Do you know? Did they? Let me just read this to you. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. President Trump just tweeted, Senator, Democrats would do much better as a party if they got together with Republicans on health care, tax cuts, security. Obstruction doesn't work. Maybe he's watching. Maybe he heard you and thought, here's a guy that gets it.
Mr. President, if you're watching, I have a series of bipartisan bills that I've introduced with Republicans on health care, on tax reform, on manufacturing, that I'd love the opportunity to sit down and talk about. There are Republicans and Democrats who try to work together in the Senate. I've gotten bills introduced and passed into law in the last Congress. The only way that happens is by having Republicans and Democrats work together, whether it's in the obscure but important area of intellectual property and patents, or it's in the more pressing area nationally of health care and tax reform. I do think we all do better when we sit down and work together.
Agreed.
When we try and pass bills that are written only by one party and in secret, I don't think that's the right path. I think the best path is to come together and listen to each other. So thanks for a chance to talk about patents.
Yeah, it was great. We appreciate it. Hope to see you again soon, Senator. And just